So good morning. We're officially starting the session now, and we've just welcome Ms. Shabnam, who's taken time to come and speak to us today. And I know it's going to be a really exciting session. Ms. Shabnam is always very interesting to hear. So I'm going to hand over to Ms. Shabnam to take on with the session, Ms.
So first, a big hello. I see some familiar faces and a real surprise. Hi, Priya. Hi. And it's lovely to meet all of you. Very sad that we have to do it like this, but hopefully next time it will be in a more intimate setting. I'm more used to talking to children, and I'm much more comfortable chatting with children because I find children are have fewer inhibitions and are happy to say whatever comes into their mind. So I request you today to just sort of channel your inner child and go with the flow and come with me. Usually when I start a session like this for adults or for children, I always ask them to play at a little bit of an imagination game with me. So bear with me for a second. Here, when you say hello to me, I would also request you to please say hello to my bunch of keys. And I want to explain why. Today, for this very short period, these keys are magic keys. And I want all of you to give these keys a few magical properties. Anything in the world, anything. What kind of magic properties do you think this bunch of keys could have? Please unmute yourself and jump in. Tell me.
And they could open the door to your imagination?
Absolutely. Anything else? What magic properties do you think these keys could have? A magical property that would be really valuable to you.
When you unlock with this key, any door could open and you could land into whatever place you want to. So I unlock Goa and I'm in Goa.
How lovely. Fabulous. What else do you think?
I think it's the curiosity behind the door, which is closed.
Absolutely. Totally. What else?
I think the keys can open the door for lifelong learning and wisdom, which then you can share with the kids.
Totally. Yeah. Yes. So I get the answers of book lovers, adults, and librarians. And any other answers? Anything else that you think?
You're on mute, Ms. Harinder. You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Maybe, ma'am, it's a key to the door, key to open the door of imagination.
Absolutely. Imagination, curiosity, lifelong learning, a key to enter any place in the world. What else?
You imagine yourself as if you are gone there and you feel as if you're the small learner child.
Absolutely.
Example, like in Alice, you would like to become like her. Thank you.
Totally.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I always, so the reason I've asked this is because there is such a huge connection, in my mind at least, between magic and fiction. Just as in magic, anything is possible. I mean, this bunch of keys could, as you say, unlock any door, take you to any place, take you to fairyland, take you to Mars, take you to 2,000 years in the future, 2,000 years in the past. Similarly, books can do exactly that. And I think as adults, when we realize this power of books and are able to communicate it to children, then never again do we have to worry about how do we get children to read. I think if we are able to communicate this element of books to a child, the child will grab a book and be a reader for life. I hope at least. To me, books allow anything. Anything is possible in a book, and anything is possible in the realm of fiction. This is not something when I started writing, I was actually an accidental writer for children. It was never part of my plan. For 10 years, I was a journalist with the Times of India, and my focus was very much the real world, reality, covering a fire, covering a storm, covering a supermodel's breakfast, fancy breakfast to raise funds, whatever. It was the entire range, the gamut of journalism, the opening of a new club, the closing of a hotel, you name it. Then something major happened in my life, and very quickly I got 3 children, and the world sort of stood on its head, and I spent all my days actually mashing potato and doody and pointing to crows and saying, look at that crow, and shoving food into 3 mouths which were unwilling to eat the bloody stuff in that teaspoon. And I was getting more and more cross and thinking life can't have sort of collapsed into this. It's ridiculous. And then one day I sort of thought, what do I really love in this world? And it struck me that more than movies, more than traveling, more than jalebis, more than cupcakes, more than souffles and mousses, more than actually anything, what I really love is books. And then I thought, why don't I try to write a book? I have the luxury, nobody is expecting anything of me other than the fact that my 3 children have their vaccinations on time and their inoculations on time, and are basically more or less well-behaved and well-fed. So, okay, so at least my mind is free and maybe I can try to write a book. But did I want to write a book for children? Absolutely not, never. What I really wanted to write was a book for adults. And my plan was to write a murder mystery, and I wanted it filled with dead bodies and bloodstains and fingerprints and cross policemen. And that was the world I wanted to enter. I had more than enough of children in my life, in the garden every evening, in the play school every morning, and that was not part of my plan. Absolutely. Then one day I sat down at my computer and I started to write. And to my absolute shock and horror, the sentence that came out, and may I read it out, the sentence that emerged was, just looking for it. In Cozy Castle, there already lived a princess, a dragon, a court jester, and an old crone who may or may not have had magical powers. So it really should have been a proper castle with flags and drawbridges and knights in a shining armor. Instead, it was a boxy grey building with 6 floors, an unreliable lift, and a one-eyed chokidar on guard dozing on an enormous swivel chair. Now, any way I looked at it, this didn't sound like an adult book. And I simply could not understand what had happened, but this was the sentence that came out, and clearly my job was now to talk more about the dragon and the crone and the magical powers and the chokidar. And there, 6 months later, I had on my hand a children's book. Okay, so one children's book, and even more miraculously, I found a publisher within a few weeks, which completely boggled my mind. The book was happening, and I thought, now I will get down. I've got these kids out of my head, and now I will get down to adult books. No. My editor called and said, do you think you could write a book about schools? A book set in the world of schools. I said, okay, one more book. Another editor called and said, do you think you could write, a book for little kids? Sort of a chapter book, a whole book? So I said, okay. And strangely, I still plan to write that adult book. But 10 children's books later, 10 children's books and about 7 picture books later, I'm still a children's writer, and I have a feeling that this is going to be it. Very sadly. But there is a special wonder to writing for children. And there is a special magic to dealing with children and books. And I think in a way, you all are in a better place to tell me about it than I am to tell you about it. But what do you feel? I don't know. I'd love to hear from you. What do you feel is special about children and books? Any responses?
Children
Ma'am, I
love
would
to
like to
explore.
share.
Sorry.
Ma'am, children love to explore. They love to explore, children.
Absolutely.
They love to know how and why they would like to do that.
Absolutely.
And for some, it just transports them into a different world.
Absolutely. And any other reasons why?
Ma'am, I would like to share. I'm sorry about my video. I'm actually out of town, so the video would be off. I would like to share a personal experience. When I first became a teacher, and I
Yes.
had to deliver this lesson in front of the tiny tots.
Right.
I was nervous because I was being, observed by my, mentor. But the moment I started the story, and the moment I saw the glitter in the children's eyes, the attention what they gave me, I
Yes.
totally forgot about the mentor, observing my lesson, and it was my first lesson. The wonder what they had, in their eyes, I was so mesmerized by that, and that gave me, my purpose, that I have to do storytelling. And now I have, shifted to becoming a librarian in the school that I'm teaching, just because of the love that the students give, us when we are narrating a story. So
Yeah.
this is, something which keeps me going.
Yes.
Okay, so according to me, when you are reading the story to the kids, and when you ask them that what is your learning through this story, like in spite of telling them your perspective, when you ask them for their perspective, they come up with the ideas. These are, I mean, just so brilliant ideas and way beyond your imagination. I love that part.
Totally agree. I always tell the children, after I finish a book session with them, I wish I had done this session before I wrote my book, because your ideas are way anything I can.
Yeah, they give you all the new perspectives which you can't even think about.
Really, really.
That
I
happens.
always feel that is the power of a series, because you write one book and then you do your session and they come up with 500 ideas, and then you can sort of use them forevermore in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually think that in the case of kids, the story is the hero of the book. You know, in the case of adult fiction, you could have a narrative format or a slice of life, or an author can indulge herself with a lot of other things. But in the case of children's books, I find it really satisfying to see that the story has to have, if it's a good book, it has to have a strong plot,
Yeah.
and it interests children, and there is a closure to it. And I love the fact that all children's books have happy endings. So
Yes. Yes. I think that's so important. No?
yeah,
I think
yeah, absolutely.
just to give them that little bit of.
Can I also share something, ma'am?
Please do. Please do.
Hello, ma'am. This is Taranno. I'm the librarian of the Indian school. So basically, I have two little kids. One is 3 years and one is 7 years. And ma'am, they give me so innovative ideas. Like sometimes when I tell a story, so they tell Mama, you can make this prop. Why didn't you make
Yeah.
this? So I think they have so many ideas, and you can't even imagine. So their imagination is like too wide, I should say. And
Right.
we have limited information, but their information is so wide. They'll give you n number of ideas which you can't even think of. So I really love to be a mother and a librarian. Thank you so much, ma'am. I really enjoying your workshop.
Thanks. So I agree. I totally agree that, when you deal with children and books, you really see the sort of the transformative magic of a story. And this is something I didn't realize till much later, because I was writing because I liked writing, because I love stories, because I enjoy the whole process of putting a book together. I think 2 or 3 years into the process, when I started getting feedback from a lot of readers, I think that is when I realized what a book can do. And obviously, my experience is limited to this very small world of the books I write, because those are the books I get responses to. Your experiences would be way, way wider. But it's incredibly amazing to me. So I have a series of books about a schoolgirl named Nimi. And Nimi is an ordinary schoolgirl. She lives in an upmarket Bombay neighborhood called Cuff Parade. She goes to a slightly alternate school called Vidya World School. There's a principal called the booming Mr. Bakshi, who booms, and he's a man with lots of ideas and an energetic sort of individual. Now, the story begins on the first day of grade 6. Nimi is extremely excited because she hasn't met her best friend Sophia in 2 months. Sophia went off to some camp in America, and Nimi is all rearing to get back to school. And she's a girl who loves words. And for her, words are just not enough. Sometimes ordinary words aren't enough, so she makes up her own words. So she's all geared, and she says, this year is going to be spectabulous. She lands up in school, And in her class, there are these a bunch of very sniffy girls led by this girl named Alisha Dubash, who, has the best of everything. She, if you say, oh, I'm so excited, I'm going for a Justin Bieber concert, she will say, oh, my tickets are platinum gold, special, super deluxe, and I am sitting on the stage and Justin Bieber is going to blow a flying kiss at me. And if you say, oh, I'm so excited, I'm going to Alibag for the weekend, Alibag, I'm going to Bali in a special helicopter and a special private chartered plane just for 6 hours. So she is one of those. And Nimi hates her and Sophia used to hate her. Now, when Nimi lands up in school on that first day, something happens that I think happens to many children in a very regular way. She goes to school and she can't see Sophia anywhere. And she's like palpitating, where is Sophia? Where is Sophia? And then the door of the classroom opens and Sophia walks in. But it's not the Sophia that she loves and knows. It's a slightly different Sophia. Sophia is looking tidy. Her uniform is fitting. Her hair has been straightened. And Sophia doesn't wave at Nimi. Sophia turns around and waves instead at Alisha Dubash. And Nimi can't understand. And she's quite clear. She says, poor Sophia, she must be jet-lagged. She must be seeing double. She must be giddy. There must be something really off about, she must be feeling very unwell. But as the day progresses, it becomes more and more clear that Sophia has switched loyalties from Nimi to Alisha Dubash, and that is that. Now, for me, this was just a very small anecdote in a big book. But so I was absolutely astonished when over the next few weeks, more and more readers seemed to come to me and say, the same thing happened to me. And towards the end of the Nimi book, her friend problems were not really resolved. And the number of letters I got from children asking me with great alarm and worry, what is going to happen to Nimi and her friends? And please, 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 in your second Nimi book, please give Nimi a friend, showed me that, in a way, even the tiniest thing that you do in a book can connects with a child. And in a way, their experiences and the experiences of the character in the book come together, and they believe that if the character can get a friend, so will they. And this, in a way, is the power of a book. I think the ability to connect with a character, to have the character, you believe if the world can go well for Nimi, who is so much like me, she's quite an ordinary girl. She's not a topper in class. She's not a beauty queen, but she's a girl in the middle like me. Then I too can have things going well. And I think book after book, we realize that a lot of what happens on the pages of the book connects with the life of a child. Over the years, I've realized, at least for me, that I write now children's books with 3 things clearly in mind. I believe that for many children, there is a sense of helplessness. You feel sometimes that you are a pawn in an adult world. I don't know if you agree with me. Would you agree with this? Do you think? Do children feel an element of helplessness and a sense of, sometimes their days, their lives, their schedule, everything is controlled by adults? And yes, so I definitely felt that way as a child. And sometimes I see the bewilderment in the eyes of my own children, when I'm hurtling them from one place to another, and in the eyes of children that I encounter. And I really felt that children's literature is a way of empowerment. I think Mr. Pinkwhistle did that through in the Enid Blyton books when we were little, and the characters of the more contemporary books are able to do that today. So it's a sense that even if you feel you are helpless, there are ways, and the universe does, if you really, really want something badly, the universe does conspire to put things together and make things go right. Sometimes. Not always, but I think that, like Priya said, is the power of a happy ending, the sense that things will work out. There is another reason why I write and why I so deliberately and determinedly set my books in the world that we inhabit, in urban India. I really would like to step into rural India as well, but it's something I don't know much about. So I stick to Mumbai because Mumbai is what I know. And I try to investigate the middle class Mumbai, because again, that is what I know. But and I try to look a little beyond it, partly because it alarms me tremendously that, and again, I don't know if you agree with me, that our children are so dismissive of the world that they inhabit. That more and more when I meet children and I ask them, what do you want to be? I would like to move to Canada. I would like to move to Australia. I would like to move to America. Oh, Europe is beautiful. You know, there was a really interesting example. Just yesterday, I took my daughter for a walk down Colaba because I've just finished a book on Colaba and she's doing the video for a little promo video for it. So she took a photograph of one building along Apollo Bandar and she posted it on Instagram. And within a few minutes, she had about 20 questions of people asking her, are you in Europe? What a beautiful building. So there's this belief that, you know, everything beautiful is in Europe. Everything beautiful is elsewhere. And for me, it was very, very important that you show children the importance of looking around, of putting down those devices for 5 minutes and looking around at the world around you and seeing that there is drama in the, you know, even if you're stuck in a traffic jam in Mumbai, you can see so much drama, you could come up with ideas for 5 stories. You could, and the power of just observation and the power of looking up, looking around and seeing that there's beauty everywhere. And as a child, I remember very much every year I would ask Santa Claus, please, Santa Claus, send me to England so I can meet all the magical characters and I can climb the faraway tree and I can see the enchanted woods and I can go to Mallory Towers. The thing is, you don't need to go to Mallory Towers and you don't need to go to the enchanted woods and you don't need to climb the faraway tree. There is magic here. And for me, that was very important. And so it absolutely thrills me. So, you know, Six Spellmakers is set in a building called Cozy Castle, which is actually revamped the building that I grew up in and the building I'm doing this session in today. It's a building called Batra House. And every year around 2 children come along Colaba Causeway looking for the building. So about a week ago, when the doorbell rang, there was a little girl and her mother said, is this Cozy Castle? And are you Shabnam Minawala? And why weren't you, where are the Bimli trees? Because this book is really about how children use magic to save 2 trees in their garden or in their compound, 2 Bimli trees. And then I have to explain to them that in reality, the Bimli trees weren't saved. They were cut down. And when I decided to write this book, I wanted it to be a conflict between 2 very bitter, crusty adults and a bunch of children. And I was wondering what the conflict could be about. And it popped into my head that the ideal thing would be the Bimli trees. And I always explain, in reality, we couldn't save them. But in the realm of fiction, we can save them. And that gives you the seed and the hope that later on, when there are battles of this kind, you can win them. So essentially, so these are the things. So another book that I wrote, What Maya, So Where Are You? Is a clue hunt around Mumbai. And so as a journalist, I traveled every corner of the city and saw every sort of alley and street, literally. And in a way, I had a collection in my head, and not a collection of postage stamps and not a collection of bottle caps, but a collection of interesting details about the city. A strange carving, a little, an interesting tree that I've never seen elsewhere or before. A statue that in a place you don't expect. And when I started this book, because it was a clue hunt around Mumbai, I sat and wrote like about 200 clues that I could use. Finally, I whittled it down just to about 20. But to me, I think the happiest feedback I get is when I meet children who say, Auntie, we made last Sunday, my mummy took me on a What Maya Saw tour around the city. And I saw that Lakshmi statue. And I saw the elephant statue. And I saw that carving. And I never seen any of this before. And there is this sense of wonder and the realization that there is beauty everywhere. Just put down those devices and look. I think, so what else? What are the other things that yes, and of course, I think what we've also already talked about, in a way, I think empathy has become a big keyword of the moment, right? Everybody's into empathy. But empathy is just the good old-fashioned I mean, it's a newfangled way of saying the good old-fashioned thing of standing in the shoes of others, of understanding how others feel, of thinking of others, of being considerate. And a book is really the most powerful tool. You understand Anne Frank, you understand the boy in the striped pajamas, you understand Famous Five, and in a sense, what it would be to be a girl like George, who is not an ordinary, who does not want to fit the norms of femininity and is always seen as a tomboy and as a rebel merely because she wants to be herself. And I don't know, now I read children's books in a very different way. And I'm happy that I feel, I don't know if you agree, but children these days are also much more discerning than we are. So, when my daughters were growing up, I kept trying to force feed them Enid Blyton. You have to read Famous Five. You have to read Secret Seven. And somehow they just weren't getting it. They just didn't seem to see it the way I did. And one day I asked them, why don't you enjoy these books? I mean, aren't they wonderful? And my littlest one, she was really tiny then, she said, it really bugs me. I have 3 daughters, right? So she said, it really bugs me that the boys get all the adventure and the girls, if the mother is sick, it's the girl who has to stay home with mama. And they always have to obey the boys. The boys are the ones who make all the big decisions. And how is that fair? So my girls were happy to read Mallory Towers and St. Clair's because it was a fully female world. So you did not have this gender discrimination. But the minute there was a mixed group, they minded bitterly. And actually that makes me very happy, though I still enjoy those books. I mean, I can still read them without feeling grumpy, but the girls can't. And have you all seen this kind of response to books in your experience? Have any of you seen this kind of way that children react differently to books from the way we did? I'm just curious.
You're talking about Enid Blyton, which I think is the books that we read as children. So I did the same thing, and I found that my children did not respond to Enid Blyton at all. They just found them so boring and flat, whereas my dream books really for them to read. And the way children are so informed these days, whether it comes to things like gender fluidity, whether it comes to things like what they feel about the world, they judge books. So if a book is not, I don't want to say politically correct, but if a book does not conform to a broader viewpoint, then they challenge it and they're like, why should we read this book? Right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, and even Joy, for example, I mean, looking at her now, she could be a person who maybe has a different sort of orientation that's there, but we didn't understand it then. Who knows?
Yeah, and in a way, she's always the one who's one, Timothy, but there is always an edge to the way, whenever she asserts herself, I get the feeling that Enid Blyton was always a little uncomfortable about letting her have her way in too many ways. And of course, it's very interesting. I don't know if any of you write, but as a writer, I feel that in a way, your characters take over. They don't always do what you want them to do. This happens to me time and again. I've just finished a murder mystery set during the lockdown, and it takes place in 2 sealed buildings. So there's one sealed building and a sealed building across, and the girl in the sealed building, Nandini Krishnan, is looking out of her window and she sees something happen in the other building on the stairwell, doesn't think about it much. Then there is a murder. Now, I had planned a rather peppy and happy murder mystery, a cheerful kind of murder mystery, if a murder mystery can be cheerful. Something very strange happened. And around the middle of the book, my character started taking on rather dark elements. And it was not in my plan. My plan had been that there would be Nandini, there would be her best friend Shania, there would be Nandini's twin Ved, and together they kind of solved the mystery. Shania lives in the other sealed building, the building in which the murder takes place. Nandini turned dark, and so did a bunch of the other characters. And strangely, my plan had been that this would be a murder committed by an adult, um, and that it would be children viewing the world of an adult. And the book just took a somersault, turned on its head, and it has taken such a strange twist. I didn't want it, but it sort of asserted itself and did it. And I'm really a bit worried. I'm waiting for my editor to read it. She's in the process of reading it. And I'm really scared she's going to say, how could you do this? Let's see what happens. So yes, characters do their own thing. And I think part of what a writer has to do is allow the character to speak. Because once you create a convincing character, then it's only right that you allow them to assert their identity, their darkness, their gender, their views. So yeah. So when I talk about the magic and the infinite potential of fiction, you then realize that fiction is also a huge tool in creating social change of some kind. And it is, as a journalist, I spent a lot of time writing editorials and news reports and sort of going, this is terrible, that is terrible, how could this happen? I was in the Times of India, so on the one hand, on the other hand, kind of editorials, and I didn't see too much impact. Okay, you'd have the people writing and saying wonderful article, but you got the feeling that you were preaching to the converted. The people who didn't agree with your views would just put the newspaper down in any case. Fiction is different. You don't bang in your message with a hammer. You tell a story. You don't go saying this is the lesson and this is the moral. You tell a story and then wait to see if it has touched a chord. And I would like to read just the opening of a book I've written called, where are you? A book I've written called When Jia Met Urmila. And this book came about, I'm sorry to say, not because I thought about it, but because my editor thought about it. And I think Miss Sushma's probably already heard me reading from this book at Neve. But I'll just read the first chapter again. And the story essentially came about because my editor at Duckbill, she called me and she said, I wanted to write another book for her. I'd written 2 and I said, can I write you another book? She said, by all means, but this time we want to move away from the safe middle class environment in which most of our books are set. We want to step outside in any way. We want some diversity. So my first plan was to write a book called Too Many Grandmothers, about a child who, because of various reasons, has 3 or 4 grandmothers, all from different cultures and all with their different rules and their norms. And then I looked around at the country around us and realized that nobody is laughing at anything and somebody will get grumpy and my book is bound to get banned or slammed and not worth it. So then I started thinking, where do I step outside my middle class world? And I remembered, something that had happened when my older daughter Alia was born. At the same time, a little girl called Sanya was born in the chawl just a couple of minutes away. And every day, every afternoon, I would be singing Alia to sleep. She was a very bad sleeper. And desperately, I'd be going, frantically singing various nursery rhymes to her and putting her to sleep. And downstairs, in the lane downstairs, Sanya and her mother would be having the same ritual. Sanya's mother would be patting her and saying, so jao, and singing a Hindi song. I'd be upstairs doing Twinkle, Twinkle. And it was incredible, the parallels. And for my husband, Vivek, and me, it seemed terribly important that Alia and Sanya become friends. So as the kids grew up, we did have them meet a couple of times. We went and visited them for Diwali. We invited them over once, but it never worked. The kids grew up, they grew up in different ways. Sanya joined a school, Alia joined a school, Alia got busy with music classes and all the fancy thing that, upper middle class children do. Sanya got busy with 100 tuitions because I think that is in a way the reality of the children in a chawl whose parents are determined to do the best for them. And it's so sad because the other day I asked Alia, do you ever chat with Sanya? And she looked at me and said, Sanya who? And I think Sanya too doesn't really know Alia, whereas the moms continue to sort of wave and hope that one day the kids will become friends. So that was what popped into my head when I decided to write this book. And the book is called When Jia Met Urmila. And I'm just going to read the first chapter. and it's called Two Girls. Jia and Urmila were born during the same stormy July 9 years ago. They both had black hair, brown eyes, 10 fingers, and 10 toes. Both their families lived in Mumbai. In fact, both families lived on Dr. Dalvi Road. So Jia and Urmila grew up just two banyan trees and one wall away from each other. It's the picture if you all would like to see. But strange as it may seem, Jia and Urmila didn't know each other at all. Perhaps this was because Jia lived on one side of a wall and Urmila lived on the other. Jia's father worked in a bank. He wore crisp shirts and striped ties. Urmila's father repaired cars and scooters. He wore faded t-shirts and rubber slippers. Jia's mother spoke in English and cooked pasta. Urmila's mother spoke in Hindi and worried about the price of tomatoes. Jia went to school in a red checked uniform and Reebok shoes, and Urmila went to school in a grey pinafore and black rubber sandals. After school, Jia rushed to tennis or to ballet. Then she did homework and read books. After school, Urmila played hopscotch on the pavement with her brother and his gang. She helped her mother cut beans or potatoes for dinner. Sometimes, if TV was really boring, she did a little homework. Jia lived in a sunny apartment with her own bedroom. Urmila lived in one room which she shared with her parents, her brother, an uncle, and a grumbling grandmother. For 9 years, Jia and Urmila lived side by side without ever meeting. A bit like the blue lines that run across the pages in a school notebook. Then one day, somebody, somewhere, crumpled the paper, the lines met, and Jia and Urmila's lives collided. So this is the first chapter I wrote. And then I started wondering, how can their lives collide? And you know, something really frightening, and I think something that really struck me with shock and horror, is that it took me almost a week of thinking to understand how these two girls who live right next door to each other, how they could actually meet in a meaningful way to start a friendship. And I realized that in a way, our cities are set in such concentric and never intersecting circles that it is possible to live a completely, a Tupperware life. Literally, you are in one Tupperware box. The person in a different economic class or a different cultural world is in another Tupperware box, and you can literally live without any intersection. And I think that says something really frightening about our lives. Anyway, I did figure out how Urmila and Jia would meet. I decided that one day Jia would have a school assignment. Her mother had a toothache, so could not take her to the garden to find what she needed, which was a hibiscus flower and a pod and a snail for like a monsoon treasure hunt that their teacher sets for them. So she steps onto the road, breaking the rule that you never leave your building society gate alone. She steps in and bumps into, she goes and enters the garden of a very scary neighbor called Mr. Jaju, who comes out and screams at her and has taken a video of her plucking everything. And then, of course, it is Urmila who saves the day, because Urmila is much tougher, much more savvy, much more witted when it comes to these kind of things. And Urmila cannot understand why Jia is just so wimpy, why she just stands around looking terrified rather than actually taking things into her hand. The two girls come together and in a way save the day. So this book, I think it was a very difficult book for me to write. I don't know how much impact it will have, but I really feel thrilled. I often get messages from libraries, across the country saying we did this book for a discussion, and we had a discussion for 1 hour about class and about people and about how it's so important to break these barriers. And I once went to a school in Goregaon, and one little girl put her hand up and said, I live in a chawl and you have told the story of my life. And I can't tell you how happy I felt and how magical that moment was for me. And I think, Ms. Rashna, should we now ask for responses and questions? Is this a good time to
Yes, it's
get
12. It's about 12:15, a little over that.
So, any
There was
questions?
a there was a there was a remark on the chat from Seema Goel while you were discussing about themes. So she had says that I think children very easily connect the books with learner profile attributes which we had no idea about back then. So I
Yes,
guess she's meaning the IB learner attributes,
yes.
principle thinking. If you'd like to elaborate on that, Seema, you're most welcome.
Yeah, so it is like as I'm working with an IB school pathways in Noida, so I can see this that whenever you are reading a story or whenever you tell them about different books, they very quickly, even without reading, just by looking at the front cover, like on the main picture, and just by reading the title, they very quickly associate it with the learner profile attributes. And at our times, we didn't even knew about it, that what are the learner profile attributes. So that is something really different. It's a very big difference in our times and these days.
The ability to connect to other things, yes, is really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions, any responses?
Taranam has put again written on the chat. She said, "Can you give us the name of the book which you just shared?"
Yeah, sure. It's called When Jia Met Urmila. It's one of the Duckbill series of whole books. So it's a chapter book. It's short. Duckbill is very particular about these books. Cannot extend 5,000 words. Cannot have words which are difficult to understand, difficult to read. The whole point being, in a way, to empower young readers who know that when they pick up a whole book, they will get a book that they can read by themselves, but will tell a fairly long and complicated story. So they know the story will be big and satisfying, but the delivery will be simple. So yeah, the entire series is really good. All the whole books, written by a range of writers. So,
Shabnam, if I may ask a question, what do you think is the role of non-fiction in children's reading?
yeah, so Priya and I worked in the same library, same school library for many years. And in fact, she was my convener. I remember being in great awe of her at that point. Priya, do you remember? So, and at that point, it was very interesting because there are the fiction readers and there are the non-fiction readers. And I don't know if you'd agree with me, but I find that non-fiction readers, boys gravitate more to non-fiction, at least in our library, that was the case. And girls seem to gravitate more to fiction. I think non-fiction is fabulous because it allows you to, build on knowledge. So, for example, one of my daughters is very interested in the working of memory and dreams and, the functioning of the brain in some ways. So she reads a lot of that. But she would never pick up a book on a random non-fiction subject. So I think it's really good for delving deep. And I think non-fiction does very different things, right? It informs, it opens another kind of door entirely. It's very important, but at least to me, it is not as appealing as fiction. Maybe it's just fiction readers, non-fiction readers. I've just finished a non-fiction book on my area of Mumbai called Kolaba. I was very nervous about it. It's a book, a mix for kids and adults. It's just the story of a neighborhood. And I really didn't know how to go about it. It's incredible. Now the amount of stuff I found out, I think I will never walk through my neighborhood again with the same eyes. I realized things I had no idea about. I realized, firstly, that the building I live in was never a part of Kolaba Island. It was part of an island called Old Woman's Island. And the entire city has, of course, now merged. I realized that this is where, right outside my window, was where the city's old cotton green was. It was where, when the American Civil War took place, cotton was not available to the rest of the world because the American South sat and burnt huge number of bales of cotton in a way to pressure the rest of the world to support the American South. They said, you won't get cotton if you support the North. the world didn't support the South. They looked to countries like India and Egypt for cotton. So Bombay then, and specifically this part of Colaba became the cotton green, and it was where millions and millions of pounds flowed into India. It happened for a very short period, about 4 years, but it was what caused the birth of this city. I realized that there's this little orange mandir at the corner of my road. Just a little mandir. It was the most important mandir of the cotton green. It was probably the place where all the traders went to pray for all their deals to go well. And after this, to the left of my window, I realized was the old Colaba railway station. To me, I think non-fiction is also a very important record of what has been. I think it's so easy to forget. My grandfather used to keep talking about Colaba railway station. He never told me where it was. So it took so much research to figure out where that station was. And believe me, I mean, you'd be amazed to find out that it's not even been 100 years since it was closed, but nobody remembers. So nonfiction, I think, tells us what the world used to be. And I think that is so important to see where we have moved, how we have moved. So yes, and so it is very important to read, but I think a different kind of important. I don't know if you agree with me.
I do agree with you. I do agree with you. I do think that boys read non-fiction more. They sort of gravitate towards it naturally. Girls gravitate towards fiction. We don't want to have stereotypes, but it is what it is. And what you said is very true.
Yeah. Rashna, Ms. Rashna, there's some more questions.
There are questions for the list of books. So do you have a website or an Instagram page that you could share with? Maybe they could look at.
I'm very bad with all things tech. I have a very Marela Facebook page. Very, very sad. But you know, if you just, I think, Google my name and just say Shabnam Minawala books, all the books come up. I have a new, so 9 of my books come up. I have the Colaba book also is just out, I think about 2-3 days ago. I suddenly realized it's on Amazon, and so things are now moving with that. And I have a new horror book coming out in about a month and a half, which is for young adults. And it is called Saira Zaribala is Afraid. And the story of that book is quite funny. It's actually a cautionary tale for teenagers. Started like that. It started when my daughter Alia got her mobile phone, and she got a number, and my husband did all his energy first, oldest daughter, new mobile phone, wanted to get her a number where the last, you know, the last number spelled her name, AALIY, you know, the alphabet connected with the number. He got this number, and every day, 20 times a day, she kept getting phones and calls and messages for somebody called Vishesh. Vishesh, how are you? Vishesh, where have you vanished? Vishesh, what's going on with you? We were like, where is this Vishesh, and who is this Vishesh, and what is going on? And then we would get these odd semi-condolence messages like, Vishesh, so sorry to hear about Tariq. And we were getting more and more worried about this whole Vishesh business. And then one day, Alia randomly picked up a call that came to her, and it was some woman who said, Vishesh, this is Priya, mommy, and how dare you do this to us? How dare you vanish like this? We are so worried about you. Nalia hung up and started to wonder, who is Vishesh and where is Vishesh and what has happened to Vishesh? It was just like, where is this person? And so Saira Zaribala starts the story by getting her phone. She keeps getting calls and messages for somebody called Akash. And unlike Alia, who is a scared and fairly sensible and wary child, she decides to do a little investigation into the mysterious disappearance of Akash and steps into a not very pleasant situation full of dead bodies and bloodstains and murder. I'm happy to say I finally got my horror, even if it's not for adults. So I do hope you'll read it one day. Yeah, so my books can be Googled. One day I will do a website where I have lots of time, or if I ever test positive for COVID and have to sit in a room alone.
So I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions more. Tarunam has written on the chat, are Duckbill books available on ebooks on any platform?
think they're available on Kindle. They also have a deal with Juggernaut of some kind. I'm not very sure about the details, but what I will do is I will put my email address down and I can check all these things. Duckbill has just merged with Penguin, so everything has wobbled a bit in the last few months. But Penguin being Penguin, I'm sure everything will soon be very quickly available. I think they're available on Kindle, actually, Duckbill books. So, but I will find out for you, and this is my email address.
Is there a last question that Ms. Shabnam can take before we wind up?
Yes. Hi.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to know what's your take on the children's bias towards foreign authors. I noticed this a little bit in my library, and it's a little disconcerting.
Very sad. It's very upsetting, and it's difficult to break through. It's really, really difficult. We've seen this in the library. We've seen this. I'm a scholastic author. One of my books, Strange Haunting of Model High School, was a scholastic book. So how it works, I'm sure you all know, is Scholastic does these big book fairs, and then they call one or two writers to do sessions. So routinely, I would do a session, and then the kids would come with Wimpy Kid for me to sign. They wanted my signature, but they wanted to read Wimpy Kid. And I would always ask, why aren't you willing to read a book set in your world? Why? But I find it very strange. I think part of the challenge that I give myself is I want my books to be, I want them to say things. I want them to give messages. I want them to convey something. But I want them to be so much fun that you will read them for the fun factor, and the other stuff will be sort of administered slyly without anybody realizing. So I'm very clear that I will, I want all my books to be fairly chatpata and non-serious. Having said that, I have now started a romance young adult novel about a boy and a girl with very different political views. The girl is very much, liberal, and she goes for protests, and the boy is very different. He's fairly conservative. He's an NRI, and I think that's for me, a tricky book to write, and I think a book with messages. So I don't know, but I don't know how that will work out. But on the whole, I try to keep my books lots of fun, in the hope that children will realize there is fun in Indian books as well. And actually, if you read Anushka Ravi Shankar's Moin and the Monster, it's truly the funniest book I have read in my life. To the point that it was banned at dinner time in our house because the kids would laugh so much that they would vomit. So you cannot read this book while you are eating because it is too messy. So yeah, but I think this is true. We do have a complex about the white world in many ways. You go to NCPA, and if the performing artist is a white person, it will be sold out. If an Indian of the same caliber, it will be 1/3 full. We just have to overcome this belief that we are in some ways not up there.
So I think we are almost at the time slot.
I would like to add one thing.
Taranum, yeah, we'll take this as the last call because we'll have to wind up after this.
Yeah,
so
ma'am. Actually, it is just an add-on to Sushma ma'am's question, because not only children reads, ma'am, they write as well. When we ask them, when we give them some story plots, so what they do is they take story characters as foreign name, and I tell them as well that why don't you take the Indian's name? Are the foreign people taking our Indian's name?
Yeah, always.
So
13-year-old who lives in New York. And then I ask, have you been to New York? No. Then how will you know what New York is like? How will you know what Jack's walk from home to school is like? Miss, I can imagine. I've seen movies. But yes, why not have your walk in Kurla or in Andheri, where you know about your Pinky gift shop and your Balaji watch repairs, and you can put so much color and flavor into it? Why do you believe everything can only happen in London or New York? And I think that is, in a sense, the challenge we face as people who are trying to bring books to children, and definitely that I face. as a writer who's trying to sell more than this piddly handful of copies. Yeah. So thank
Thank
you
you so much,
very
ma'am.
much for having been at the
So
session.
thank you, Ms. Shabnam, for taking this session. It was really interesting, as always. And really looking forward to reading your books, your upcoming books, your horror book and your mystery book sounds really interesting. And you've got a lot of notes on the chat to say thank you. And the session has been really entertaining and informative as well.
Very, I enjoyed it a lot, and hope we meet in the real world one day soon. Bye. Bye, Priya. Thanks for attending.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.